It's Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. What's up, humans? This is Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. Welcome to the show. We are getting into the holiday season, so I will be bidding you guys adieu until the new year, and I will let you know what happened. I know I'm going to make you wait with my embryo transfer. That's going to be November 2nd. And, haven't been drinking any alcohol. So during the holidays, it's always tough, right? Because you want to have a drink with friends and there's so many parties. But it's kind of interesting when you go to these parties and you're the only sober one and you're like, oh, this is what it's like. Like remembering everything, remembering every detail, everything that happened. I'm one of those people that sometimes will completely forget everything that happened when I drink. So, but I woke up this morning feeling like, the only way I can describe it is like somebody took a baseball bat and then beat my butt with it. Like it's the outer parts of my gluteus muscle that we have to stab the literal sesame oil with progesterone in it. And so that's tough, right? You're putting this thick oil in between your muscles. So you're literally separating the muscle and stretching it out. So it's extremely painful. It feels like I tore a muscle or pulled a muscle and I'm trying to like stretch it out, which is what you're supposed to do. Walk around, stretch it out a little bit, rub in circles, did all that, did a heating pad for, over an hour. And I'm just still in so much pain. I'll probably end up taking some ibuprofen today since it is muscular. This is only day 2 and I feel like this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel like a truck hit me by the end of this. But we'll see. This is it for us. This is our last little embryo, a 5cc. It's a little straggly. We hope it survives the thaw. But it's coming up quick. Like this month of October flew by so fast because of the IVF and my house also falling apart. We had a leak and it looks like the insurance is going to pull through with the amount of money I spent on insurance. I sure hope it does. So I'm hoping that by Thanksgiving, which is also my birthday, I'm a turkey baby. So every 7 years, my birthday lands on Thanksgiving, that our floors will be done. But it just depends. It is the holidays. There might not be people, contractors available to come and fix the floors quite so soon. But the worst part about it is I feel like I'm losing my hearing because we've had these really loud fans going for days in our house. And I know my cats aren't enjoying it and they're meowing and they're like, oh my gosh, please let me in the bedroom. It's the only quiet space, or the room I'm in right now, actually. If you listen very carefully, you might hear a humming in the background, but it's just been, that part has sucked. And, as a singer, it's like, okay, I need to protect my hearing. And we just ran out of earplugs too. So I'm like, earplugs, I need them right now. As much as the cats can get outdoors, they are getting outdoors. And I love my little black kitty because during Halloween, I give her like her little Halloween color and she's my little black cat on Halloween. We did carve a pumpkin, a really big one. We got a really big one this time and put it out on the front. And the other day, we cleaned it out. I'm going to save the pumpkin seeds, see if we can grow any pumpkins. We had started growing pumpkins one year out in the back and then all of a sudden they died. Like they got like to a decent, growth. And then all of a sudden I guess it didn't get enough water or something. And there's a little bit of shade back there. But considering we just cut down a lot of branches, we've got a lot more sun in the backyard now. So we'll see if I can get those to grow. But on our pumpkin, we did the TARDIS. So we did the TARDIS from Doctor Who, and I am now a Doctor Who fan. It took me a minute to get into, and it might have been because of the Doctor. And I realized I am now obsessed with David Tennant. And it might be the hormones too, but I bawled my eyes out on his last episode. And then I heard that he's coming back, or is he back already? I don't know. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how are they going to like put that into the story? Like, the best form of Doctor Who will stick or something. And then maybe he'll be the forever form. I don't know. But he was also Kilgrave in Jessica Jones. And I remember seeing him in that before I knew him as Doctor Who. And I was like, wow, this guy's a great actor. He played really creepy. He did a really great job with it. But he just grabbed my heart. There's certain people, and I'm an empath, but like there's certain people that just grab your heart and you feel something through the television. I feel like you can be a really good actor. You can do all the right things. You can be dynamic, but there's certain people that you feel this like loving feeling towards. And he's one of those people. Robin Williams was one of those people. Matthew Perry was one of those people, and I'm devastated. I just read his book this year, and then I passed it along to my dad because my dad suffers with addiction and alcoholism, and just to be like, read this. Like, if he can pull through, you can pull through. And Matthew Perry's addiction was, I mean, one of the worst I have known or read about. He would take 51 pills a day, and if you look at his Instagram, it looks like, especially towards the end of the book, it looks like he was reaching out and he was sending us, the bat signal and being like, hey, this is it for me. And it's so hard. And I will never know. I will never know that fit. I mean, I can't say never, but I don't suffer from what he suffered from. And it's just that internal imposter syndrome and depression and never feeling good enough. And everybody, it didn't matter how many people told him he was good enough. He never felt that way, and it just devastates me. They say that drowning is one of the more peaceful ways to go, I suppose. And I don't know if it was self-inflicted. He was by himself. We'll never know. But I do believe with all my heart that he is at peace now, because the amount of, things, firing off in his brain at all times was debilitating for him. And I do feel it was a peaceful release. I can only hope that. And I hope Robin Williams is up there in heaven with open arms being like, welcome, buddy. Everything's good here, kind of a thing. He was my favorite character on Friends. And I know that every year it's like, sometimes you'd switch and change depending on where the dynamic was. Monica was always hilarious for me, vacuuming her own vacuum, and she was the funny characters. And then they were together. So then it was like, for me, it was like Team Bing, and it was just like, them together was great. And he was just so funny, and nobody could do what he did. Yet he was someone to admire and learn from, but only he could do what he did just so incredibly. I mean, he's a standout performer, 100%. So my heart goes out to his friends and family. I feel like he was my friend because of how often he's in my house. Chandler, at least Chandler. Maybe not Matthew Perry, but at least Chandler was in my house most of my life. And I still put on Friends when I'm down or I need something in the background. A lot how people like putting football on in the background. It's something that, eases your mind and makes you feel at home. And he did that for me. In other news, Mike Pence has dropped out of the primary, even though he just had interviews talking about how he was going to run. And, I don't blame the guy. I'm like, the attention he got during the Trump era, I just can't imagine any politician being at his age and being like, you know what, let me do this. Like, he probably understands the amount of money. I hate that money is like one of the main reasons why anybody wins a race. It's just so stupid. But the stress it would have on your family, it's like, I'm sure he probably was like, you know what? I just want to live my life with my family and not have people, commenting and messaging me in this world of, social media and, being judged and criticized every 2 seconds. So I imagine that's the reason he was like, you know what? I'm good. This is not worth it for me. And I don't think he would win anyways. And maybe looking at statistics, he realized that as well. I can only hope that when we do start this next round, that people try their best, especially Republicans, to not listen to these hyperbolic statements that right-winged Republicans make, that Trump has made for so many years, and just put on your thinking caps and look at what they are offering us, not what they are pretending to promise us, but what they can actually offer us with intelligence and have a real plan moving forward, not just empty promises. And to honestly try to leave your personal opinions and religion and indoctrinations that you think are happening in the world separate from this. This is about, our economy. This is about our government. This is about how We live every day, regardless of what your personal opinions are on somebody's personal choices. The only healthy way to be indoctrinated is if you force them to watch 8,000 episodes of Doctor Who, okay? That's the only doctor indoctrination you should be okay to have. We need to really separate these things and focus on a common goal. And your cocktail of the day is the Gravedigger. This is going to be 1.5 ounces of Reposado tequila, 0.5 ounces of mezcal, 1 ounce of Fino sherry, 0.5 ounces of pear liqueur. You're going to stir all ingredients and strain over a large ice cube. Garnish with a lemon twist and edible flower. Enjoy! This is Halloween. All right, guys, let's talk about Halloween. And I wanted to clear something up about what certain symbols mean and how they've changed over time. This happens in the Buddhist culture. People will take symbols that meant something completely different, even like the swastika, which was appropriated by the Nazis. In Hinduism, it was conducive to your well-being and also symbolized prosperity and good luck. In certain Indo-European religions, it was lightning bolts that represent the thunder god and the king of the gods, like Zeus, in Greek religion. In Buddhism, it represents the footprints of the Buddha, so you'll find actually those symbols on the feet or palms of Buddhas. And it was auspicious for most of the Western world until the Nazis took it, and then we associated it with something terrible. So the same thing happened with the pentagram, or the pentacle, which makes it a pentacle when you have the circle around it. And we mostly see it, in film. It's, for Wiccans and witches and, in paganism. Religiously, it was a Christian symbol for the 5 senses or for the 5 wounds of Christ. And with the Wiccans, it's more of a sign of life and connections. And like many things, we can trace it back to ancient Greece and Babylonia. And then in Chinese culture, they look at it as the 5 phases of life. So it could mean water, fire, metal, earth, and wood. Or in Christian influences, it's more earth, water, air, and fire. And then the highest, topmost point is supposed to be spirit. And then in modern days, of course, the occultists got a hold of it. And the pagans look at it, we associate it with black magic and, Satan. And the Church of Satan uses the inverted pentagram as part of its logo. And they add the goat's head, which the goat is relative to the devil, framed by the star. But the original magic of it is that it's supposed to help protect you from evil spirits and protection of yourself and infinity, and that's kind of what it represents, is the triumph of matter over the spirit. And the way that you draw it matters. So whether it's a reversed pentagram or you draw it with your right hand or you draw it with your left hand, those matter as well. A reversed pentagram with 2 points that project upwards is a symbol of evil, and that's what attracts the evil, sinister forces. And even palm readers will see the 5-pointed star in the lines on your hand and give those significant meanings as well. And I don't want to say anything is specific because each reader has a different, meaning for it, and typically positive. In Judaism, at least 300 BCE, it was used as a stamp of Jerusalem. It was used to represent justice, mercy, and wisdom. It was also it's on the Moroccan flag, and that was used there. And people can take any symbol. People take the cross and turn it upside down and make it something bad. And people could take any symbol and twist it and make it part of their thing. The KKK. We can't just all of a sudden take modern culture and then forget all of the history of it. And because the star could bring wealth and prosperity, you would see it on the bottom of pottery, and they thought it was a mark of tax collectors. And then you see the shape depicted in Leonardo da Vinci's drawing of the Vitruvian Man, stretched out within the circle, which it's just like Shakespeare, like the, theories of Shakespeare not really writing everything that he did. Same thing. They're like, oh, actually, we think it was the work of this Giacomo Andrea de Ferrara, which is a pretty name, right? And that it was kind of stolen, and they were friends, they were close friends. So who knows? Maybe he was like, yeah, sure, you can take it, make it famous. Who knows? I don't know. But it just goes to show how things can change over time. And For a long time, the symbol, the pagan star, was actually a very big symbol in Christianity. But it was when people started calling people witches and murdering them and burning them at the stake and prosecuting them that they started going into hiding. And that those people started being called witches, and then therefore the Wiccan culture came about, and they kind of adopted the symbol as a place of protection. And so then the Christians let go of the symbol and then started associating it with people who they believed were witches. And so then they kind of just went with it. They're like, well, this is now our symbol of protection. And, that happens a lot in history, is something is adopted and changed over time. And you're like, wait, but why? And then Christians are like, oh, that's evil, that's hateful. And I'm like, actually, you guys were the evil, hateful people accusing people. You believe in all of this stuff in the Bible that, God can turn water into wine and make fish plentiful and all these things. You believe in that, talking bushes and such, but we can't believe that maybe somebody was a healer and they understood medicine or something like that. Like, I'm watching Outlander, and that's kind of the same thing. She's a healer and they're like, you're a witch. And she's like, I just am good with herbs and I know how to heal this person, and people just point at people and accuse them, and then they'd be burned at the stake. And there was no investigation. It was just taking someone's word for it back then. So of course these people went into hiding, and it was like a symbol for them. They're like, hey, if I see you wearing the symbol, I know that you're one of us and you're safe with me, and it's okay to be pagan, and the same way that people wear the cross, they see someone else wearing the cross, like, oh, you're a woman of faith. Well, great. And they might treat you differently. And that's what people do in this world. People get into groups, they get into occults, they, even though you don't want to say, like I said in my last episode, even Mother Teresa and the nuns admitted, like, oh, I think we were part of a cult. It doesn't matter what side of the fence that you're on. It's still the same practices. People getting together with a common belief and worship and understanding. And for them, they felt a community. The symbol was also associated with Ishtar, which is the Greek goddess of love and fertility. So there was a lot of good things associated with it. And of course, related to astrology, which, back in the day, I'm sure they had a lot of time to look at the stars and make notes on what was moving around. So the pentagram of Venus has 5 lobes, so that's the pentagram. And it just happened. We, went into retrograde, right? And it got really close to the Earth. Venus goes around the sun almost 13, which I'm like, ooh, 13, the number 13 times, or 13.004 times. And it takes 8 years. It's an 8-year cycle that Venus gets as close as possible to the Earth. And that's when you see it directly in front of the sun, and that's called the inferior conjunction. So just like the Greek eye and all things like that, I would look at the star, the pentagram, as more of a symbol of protection. Now, if it is inverted, then I guess at that point I would say, okay, if you don't agree with that and worshiping Satan, then that would be a little bit more alarming. But, it just goes to show that symbols can be taken, and they could have different meanings in different cultures and be taken out of context. And some people might just, for Halloween, wear it for funsies and be like, I'm a witch and this is fun. So maybe don't take it too seriously during the Halloween season. So speaking of Halloween, Halloween traces back to medieval Christianity. Hallow is Old English for holy. It can mean saint. And the Christian holiday we all know is All Saints Day, or All Hallows Eve, or day, and then the day before was All Hallows Eve, and then that was shortened to Halloween. And of course, this all has to do with the changing of seasons and spirits, the spirit world, basically. So it started October 31st. The oldest account is the ancient Gaelic festival of Samhain, and that was a Celtic spiritual tradition. So that was from October 31st to November 1st, and they'd welcome in the harvest, and they're like, ooh, it's the dark part of the year, the clocks and everything, even though it gets dark anyways. And then you're kind of celebrating like the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world, and just kind of allowing yourself to have more interaction between humans and the other world. And this was one of their most significant festivals, is between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. And After the harvest was complete, celebrants would join with the Druid priests, and they would light a community fire, and they'd use a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. So the wheel was considered a representation of the sun, and then you'd use it along with prayers. Even cattle was sacrificed. We know there's a lot of sacrifices that happen biblically, and people would take a flame from the bonfire, and then they'd relight their own hearth or fireplace. They even mentioned 6 days of drinking alcohol to excess, so go ahead and do that. Get your mead or your beer. And then, of course, gluttonous feasts. And the etymology of Halloween, does have Christian roots. Even the Pope, made the Pantheon in Rome. He dedicated that to the saints. And later on, another Pope, Gregory III, dedicated a chapel in St. Peter's Basilica to the saints as well. And of course, everything happens in threes. And, in early days, they'd have 3 days and 3 nights. And the community was required to show themselves, so local kings. And if they didn't, they could actually result in punishment from the gods. They could come after you, or maybe you'd get illness or you would die or something like that. These are all superstitions, of course. And then, so you would have the All Saints Day, Hallows Eve, and then All Souls Day. And so those are the 3-day collectively known as Hallowtide. So, though it is a secular celebration, it is rooted in pagan roots and Christian as well. And the lore just kept continuing. Then we started doing like the Irish custom of the lighting the jack-o'-lanterns to ward off evil spirits. They even had a character named Stingy Jack, and he outsmarts the devil and avoids hell, but his sinful dealings keep his soul out of heaven. But instead, his soul roams the earth, lighting his path with an ember held in a carved radish. So we have all these fun stories that we've put with it, and there's mystical things. And during Halloween, you'll often see fortune tellers and things like that, because a lot of the games evolved over time. So instead of connecting with the dead, it was more like, let's tell the future. And so we had palm readers. We started bobbing for apples, because that somehow became a fortune telling game. And apples would be selected to represent all of the women's suitors. So, very much like at a wedding, it's like, oh, if you catch the garter or the bouquet, stuff like that. And if you would bite into the apple, it would supposedly represent the future husband. So, of course, the 19th century women loved those festivals. And then what about the trick-or-treating? So that was considered souling, and they'd go door to door asking for soul cakes. So similar to like a biscuit, and they would do it in exchange for prayers for the dead that were in purgatory. And All Souls Day involved getting dressed up. But, it's the idea of swapping prayers for tricks, instead of candy. And then costumes evolved too. And it was mostly with Scottish and Irish pranksters, and they would want to spook like their neighbors. And then so that kind of got evolved in the United States with the trick-or-treating. The candy thing became mainstream more in the mid-1900s. And the whole point of giving the candy is to be like, excuse me, please don't make a prank on me. Don't pull a prank on me. Don't egg my house. Don't toilet paper my house. I will give you candy if you don't do this. So then it would be like the houses that weren't giving candy, they would get pranked. Now, I have some Irish and Scottish roots, so I was happy to hear this, but we can thank the Irish and the Scottish immigrants for Halloween, because they're the ones that kept the celebration alive, because it almost didn't make it across the Atlantic. The Puritans were disapproving of the holiday's pagan roots, so they didn't take part. So we can thank the Irish and Scottish for the zeitgeist that ended up taking hold. And I didn't look this up, but I'm sure this is kind of where Mardi Gras evolved as well. They had criers that would dress in black, and they would parade the streets, and they'd be ringing a bell and, just praying to the poor souls that have been lost. Of course, they would visit the graves, light candles, place flowers, and pray for their loved ones. And even Shakespeare mentions souling in The Two Gentlemen of Verona. He mentions that as well. And they'd also carry lanterns that were made of hollowed out turnips. So that's kind of cool. So what about witches and brooms? How did this all start? It is definitely associated with domestic women in their households and sweeping up the ash from a fire and using actual shrubs, which is where the word broom derived from. So the etymology actually comes from certain, original names from these shrubs made of sticks and things. So they'd be called twig besom, or it would be a broomcorn. But witches and brooms can be associated as early as a man first, and then also a woman named Alice Kyteler. She was accused of witchcraft because she was sweeping her neighbor's doorsteps and then of course they thought it was because she was trying to sweep away their good fortune. Like, come on now. Then we have the man, Peter Waldo, who created the breakaway group Waldensians, and they kind of went against the church and was a heretic that basically admitted that he flew on a broom because he thought it was ridiculous, because the church was, scoffing at witches and, saying there's warnings about them and, that they're running amok, in the countryside and making pacts with the devil. And so he was charged and then sentenced to life in prison because they assumed he was also one of them. And it was a crime, as you know. So he was tortured and imprisoned for the rest of his life. The Roman Catholic Church was also disturbed that he used the non-Latin version of the Bible, and like baptism today was to be by full immersion in water and not administered to infants, and also that bread and wine were symbols only. It wasn't transubstantiation, and they also rejected the notion of purgatory and prayers offered to the dead. So they were more on like the simplified, biblicism of it all. And they also didn't believe that you had to have a building, that you could have a service in your home, Bible study basically, or your stables or whatever other location that they wanted, which doesn't sound so off today, right? We seem to be more open in religion here today. And it's kind of sad that, he was prosecuted the way that he was. And of course, we get a lot of our lore from pictures and paintings. And there was an image with witches on brooms, and that dates back to 1451. And there was 2 illustrations that were where one woman soars through the air on a broom and the other flies aboard a plain white stick. So they're both wearing headscarves, which to them identified them as the Waldensians. And that's another reason why they were like, oh, we accuse you of being a witch. Look at this painting. And you match the painting. And he's like, fine, I'm a witch. I'll ride a broom, like whatever. And they were branded, as heretics by the Catholic Church. And also partly because they allowed women to become priests. I mean, in fact, I think that they were ahead of their times. Very progressive of them. And then the association between witches and brooms actually might have roots in pagan fertility rituals. I'm like, maybe this Halloween season, I'll get my cinnamon broomstick and I'll dance around my fire pit. I'll do anything at this point. But farmers would leap and dance on poles. They'll use pitchforks or their brooms, and they do it like in a full moon. And they thought that would encourage the growth of their crops, which of course eventually got misconstrued into being about orgies and other illicit things. So, it's the game of telephone. It's people misinterpreting and taking things and deciding this is what they think it actually is, rather than like listening and having conversations, which we should be doing all the time, is having conversations and negotiations instead of war, hate, evil, and killing. And, it is a sad world we live in. And sometimes we look at today and say, what's wrong with the world? Why can't it be like the olden days? And then you look back at the olden days and you go, oh God, I'm glad I'm in modern times, because things have always been this. There has always been good and evil everywhere that we go. So maybe the next time you see the pentagram, think of it a little bit differently. I mean, it was used, influenced with artists, and it's in architecture everywhere. So many churches have this shape, so many drawings and carvings, of old Greek goddesses and things, stained glass windows. Even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has the pentagram. And it's used. I mean, people hear the word Wiccan and they think of it as, so awful, but some of the things that, that they care about is actually nice. They are using it as a form of femininity and prayer and, talking to the people that were before us. So sometimes it can actually be a positive thing. And when we look and we choose to look at the positive things and not the negative things, it can help us better understand. I'm not saying that anybody should be worshiping Satan, but sometimes there are good parts to the history of these symbols. So I will choose to look at it as a positive, sacred symbol, to seek spirituality and clarity and fertility. Hey, let's use it for that too. It's supposed to be, about the elements of the earth and to protect you. So I like the idea of that. So there's a nugget of history into Halloween and all the witchery. And, there's so much more to dive into. I could sit here and talk about all the Greek lore and astrology, but that's that would take forever. So just gave you a few little nuggets in there. Also, if you are not subscribed, but you listen, please click the subscribe button because that is the only way that I can continue to move forward with my podcast and hopefully monetize it. I did celebrate 50 episodes last week, so woohoo! How exciting. If you know anyone else that listens to podcasts, I would love a recommendation since I do feel like there is a episode for everybody. So please subscribe, share, listen. Feel free to comment and join my Facebook page as well, because there I can answer any questions or if you have any thoughts on any current episode or any episodes in the past. It really doesn't matter what order you go in, although sometimes I do like to lead my podcasts with current events. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Katie Rose, served straight up with a twist.